Welcome to another episode of Brutal Geek. I'm your host Dustin, and today we're going to delve into German wheat beers, specifically the Hefeweizen. Many Hefeweizens are still brewed in accordance to the German purity law of 1516. That's a law that stated only 3 ingredients could be used to make beer: water, barley, and hops. They added yeast later once they realized that that's what actually helps the fermentation process, but a lot of beers are still brewed that way. The first beer I've got up is the Erdinger Hefeweizen. A little bit of bitterness on the back end, sweetness in the beginning. Now when pouring a Hefeweizen, you want to make sure that you tilt the glass at about a 45-degree angle. Pour slow as you watch the beer coming into the glass so you can keep an eye on how large the head is getting. It's getting a little too big. Even the best of us screw up. The Erdinger is a nice cloudy straw color with a nice shock white head. Let's give it a taste. A little bit sweet on the nose, a bit of hops in the middle there, and it kind of finishes with a little bit of a bitterness to it. This Hefeweizen would go really well with some German Weichwurst, sausages, pretzels, cheese dips, that kind of a thing. Any kind of Oktoberfest fare, this beer would go great with it. The Erdinger is one of the beers that is still brewed in accordance with the German purity laws of 1516. It's got a simplistic taste, very, very natural flavors for a Hefeweizen. Not going too crazy or anything like that out there, but just under 5.5%. It's pretty drinkable. You can have a few. It's a great beer. The second beer on the chopping block today, or tasting block rather, is Paulaner Hefeweizen. Paulaner is a brewery based out of Munich, Germany. Being so, they are one of the only 6 breweries that are allowed to be sold at the Oktoberfest festival. Paulaner still brews in accordance to the Bavarian purity law of 1516. That means that the only ingredients in this beer are water, hops, barley, and yeast. Always with that 45 angle, nice and slow. You don't want to rush it. That agitates the beer, creates a lot more head than you want. Now the head is an important part of the beer, especially a German beer. It carries a different taste, and a taste that mixes very well with the beer itself. Just on the nose, I'm getting a little banana, a little bit of almost bubblegum kind of yeastiness. A little bit of a darker straw than the Erdinger. A very nice color, cloudy as well. It's highly carbonated, especially for a Hefeweizen. A lot of bubbles in here. A little bit of a bitterness on the back end, just like the Erdinger was, almost spicy. It's a little bit of a cop-out as it is a staple of German food, but again, this would go great with Weichwurst, Spätzle, any kind of schnitzel, chicken or pork schnitzel, smoked hams. I can see this paired with richer seafood as well, scallops or lobster maybe. Paulaner's been doing it for a very long time. They're good at what they do. Now this last beer might be a bit of a cheat. It's not technically a Hefeweizen, but I did say German wheat beers in the beginning, specifically to drink this one. This is one of my favorite beers in the entire world. Weihenstephaner Vitus. Yes, Weihenstephaner. It's brewed on a hill called Weihenstephan. Breweries aren't that clever sometimes. But one of the cool things about Weihenstephaner is that they are the oldest brewery that's still operating in the world. They were created in 1040 AD, which means they'll be celebrating their 1,000-year anniversary in 20 years. That's gonna be one hell of a party. You think Oktoberfest is crazy. Now I'm a big fan of Hefeweizens and wheat beers in general. Makes it a little difficult for me. My wife's allergic to wheat. We don't really keep them in the house very often. So I use this as an excuse to buy the Vitus. If the Paulaner and the Erdinger Hefeweizens were your mom's Toyota van, the Weihenstephaner Vitus is a Ferrari 488. This is what's called a Weizenbock. It's basically a mixture of a bock and a Weissbier, or a wheat beer. The reason I say that there's that big of a difference between these beers is that while it might not look like it, the Weihenstephaner Vitus is packed with a lot of flavor and 7.7% alcohol. This is one of the only wheat beers that I have found with an alcohol percentage usually reserved for IPAs. Get a lot of wheat smell, a little bit of fruit. So the Weizenbock, or at least the Weihenstephaner Vitus specifically, doesn't really taste like a regular German Bock beer. It tastes more like a fruity Hefeweizen, which means that a 7.7% beer goes down a little too easy, if you get my meaning. It's got a very effervescent feel in your mouth, high carbonation, a lot of bubbles. I would probably pair this with red meats, steaks, strong cheeses. So probably pair well with some dessert pastries as well. Apple tarts, apple turnovers, apple strudel. Apple would be a very good taste with this. You don't get any of the citrus that you get from American wheat beers or the lemon peel that you get from some Hefeweizens. Not getting any banana or clove hints in here at all, which means they didn't inherit that from the Hefeweizen side. That about sums it up for Hefeweizens. I'll see you next time on Brutal Geek.